G'day, legends, and welcome to a special edition of the Celtic Down Under podcast. I'm your host, Jarrod, and joining me tonight while we discuss and do a preview to the upcoming Champions League game is Justin Croser, who's the host of the RBL Talk Podcast. So I thought it's a good opportunity to get an Australian-based Celtic podcast and an Australian-based RB Leipzig podcast on together to talk about our upcoming Champions League game. So how are you going, Justin?
Yeah, good, Jarrod. Thanks for having me. It's not often that two Australian podcasters get to sit down and have a chat with each other, so really looking forward to it.
It's pretty funny, I reckon. Like two guys talking about European football, and we're on the other side of the world. It's brilliant. It's a good laugh.
Yeah, it is.
Looking forward to the podcast. Looking forward to the game, and yeah, we'll talk about the game towards the end of the pod. But what I want to do is just start off with asking you, Justin, a bit about your show. Tell us about it, and let us know where people can find it.
Yeah, so RBL Talk is a RB Leipzig podcast in English. I do watch-alongs. The podcast itself is all on major podcasting networks, Spotify, Apple, YouTube in both video and audio format. And basically gives every single RB Leipzig fan a voice, whether they speak German or English, even though it's a predominantly English podcast. I just use a little bit of Google Translate, and I do inform people when I do that, including when I give out news and stuff as well on the show that I've found on sports websites like Kicker, which is a German paper article site for us as like the Australian or the Advertiser in Adelaide, where I'm from, and basically. It's pretty much that, and it's just grown into the biggest podcast in around the world, pretty much, for RB Leipzig.
So basically, any RB Leipzig fans tuning in, depending on what time of the day, Guten Morgen or Guten Tag to you all. That's about all I'll throw your way at that, and we'll keep the rest in English. So, just want to start off here, Justin, with just want to get to know, since as you said, you're based here in Adelaide in Australia. I want to know what sparked your interest in RB Leipzig. I want to know about you and following the club. So how long have you been, what made you a fan of them? How long have you been following them?
Yeah, so this is a funny one, actually. I've been, following them since, late 2009, early 2010, when the club was actually founded. There's a big way of how they got founded, that they're not a real club, and 50-1 and all this other stuff, which we can touch on base if you would like. But basically, my family are from Saxony in Leipzig specifically, and the rest are from Holstein in Kiel, which is northern Germany. So basically, I wanted to support a football club. Well, we normally call it soccer, considering I grew up with European parents from Germany and also from Yugoslavia as well. So I wanted to support a club, and I was already a fan of the Red Bull Formula One team, as I do like my Formula One racing as well. And I was doing Google search, and good old Google, and I found out that there was a team in Leipzig that was newly created, and I didn't. I knew a little bit about how 50-1 works and things like that, but I thought, I wanted to just be a part of something from the ground up, which is not very hard to see and to do these days. And I basically did it because of family. So most of my family is still over there in Leipzig that didn't come over to Australia.
It's always good to get a bit know about, tongue tie there, get to know a little bit about you there, and why that happens, because that's something I always get asked whenever I go on another podcast. Oh, you're Australian, how'd you become a Celtic fan? And it's because of family as well. So it's the same sort of thing there. So it's always good to get to know that. And yeah, I just want to know, in your opinion, what do you think the team's biggest achievement so far is, considering, you said they founded, 2009, so what's that, 14 years, 15, it's probably the 15th season, wouldn't it? So what do you think the team's biggest achievement so far is?
Oh, look, there's a couple of things. I mean, getting the first DFB Pokal trophy, I think it was 21-22 season, then we went back to back with that. And then, which is actually the reason why I created the podcast, is because we got hammered by Dortmund 4-1, if I remember correctly, which we also lost to them just recently at the top spiel on the weekend before our upcoming game as well.
We got hammered by Dortmund not long ago, so it's just the thing that happens.
Yeah, so... I just lost my train of thought there. But
Yeah,
yeah, like, what were you talking about?
uh, your biggest achievement. So you're saying about
Yeah,
going back
that's right.
back in the
Yeah,
cup.
that's right. But also, getting into the Bundesliga as well in such a short time, like being a RB Leipzig supporter, especially from early on, a lot of people now are starting to get that really high expectation, and for me, it's always like this is really where we were from. Not long ago, we were just in the third division, the three Liga, and that's basically where I started able to watch the games, live stream games on TV Sports or whoever had the rights at the time in Australia for it. And going from the three Liga all the way to the Bundesliga in, I think it was about 3, maybe 4 seasons, and then finishing runners up to the Rekordmeister Bayern Munich in the very first season as well. That I think that's also a record achievement in its own right.
That's great to know that that's the reason for it, and you're enjoying those achievements, everything. And yeah, it is winning trophies is a great thing too. So we have as that's something that we do it all the time for us. If we don't win a trophy, it's like a big issue or whatever. So yeah, like you just touched on it about the 50 plus one, and that's something that I wanted to roll into and have a bit of a chat with you because I used to work for a German company based over in Bremen, got a lot of friends who are Werder Bremen fans, and they don't like, they don't like, yours again, they don't like Hamburg, they don't like Dortmund, and they don't like Leipzig. They're the three clubs. And then I've got some mates who are St. Pauli fans, and they don't like you guys much either because of the whole 50 plus one and ownership stake. So what I wanted to do was just how do you feel about the team's controversial origins and Red Bull's involvement in the club? And I use the word controversial in the way, that's how other people say it, but to you, it probably wouldn't be. So, how do you feel about all of that?
Yeah, look, so I'm sort of divided on it. It would be nice to have, all the paying members in Leipzig because we're predominantly more popular in Germany and Leipzig than anywhere else around in Germany, to be able to have more of a say in how the club is run and things like that. As Red Bull technically owns it through like a not-profit organization. They don't actually own it through the Red Bull themselves, like the actual company itself, because technically that would be illegal and against 50 to plus one. Like we can't just be like like the Saudis or anything like that and just pump any sort of money into Red Bull. RB Leipzig, I should say. Red Bull are very structured in how the club is run money wise and getting in players and selling players on for profit and things like that. I mean, it would be nice one day to be, I've said a couple of times that, maybe like 49% owned from, the paying members, 49% for, Red Bull, however they've got it structured, say currently at the moment, because I still think it would be against 50 plus one to have the company own it that completely. And then the other 2% is like a small, like little not-for-profit type thing with both based in Leipzig in Germany to try to bring like players and young youth through the team and things like that, and more community focused and based like that, with possibly a pathway into the youth system at RB Leipzig if they so choose. But as long as Red Bull do right by the club and do what's best for the club, I've got no issues with it because ownership around the world is not uncommon for companies or moguls or groups or anything like that, or even just sole people to own football clubs. It's just a new thing or a very frowned upon thing over in Germany. But the way I look at it, it's very hard to have that 50 to plus one model and be successful without some sort of guidance, so to speak, to be able to compete with the Rekordmeister Bayern Munich even this season. They just seem to be running away with the league already.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, the way the 50 plus one works to me, because yeah, I like the ideas you're putting forward and ways to get to that, get it more on track with that, and I appreciate that. And I like the sounds of it. Like I think there's only 2 clubs in Germany that have the exemptions to be able to be above that, and that's because they started off as works teams for their companies, like Bayer Leverkusen with Bayer Pharmaceuticals and all that. That was their works team, and then Wolfsburg is Volkswagen's one as well. If my memory's right, I think they're the only two. So everyone else has to go by 50% plus one vote or whatever it is, fan ownership, and then everything else can be that. So yeah, I like that idea, but at the same time, and I know a lot of Celtic fans would like that idea too because we tend to be a bit more of the I don't know how you'd sum it up, probably a bit more left leaning than a lot of other clubs in that regard. And yeah, it's It's always interesting that. So you're talking about the community before, Justin, and I want to know how important is the team's connection to the city of Leipzig and the community. You said you're a lot more well liked in Leipzig than elsewhere in Germany. So what's that like?
Yeah, so a lot of people are supporters in Leipzig. There is two other teams in Leipzig that pretty much the rest of the Bundesliga, or we could probably say the DFL or DFB. I can't remember which one it is. That basically operates all the German national football teams at the national standard. Like to give us about that they were around before us. One's I think Lokomotive, and then I forget the other Leipzig one. But those teams really they don't have they have a loyal fan base, but they're very small fan base. RB Leipzig is a lot bigger, a lot better. Obviously, I'm going to be biased in that perspective, and we also seem to attract. Newer fans as well. I don't know if that's because, like, we're the hip team or whatever, or how it is or whatnot. But if you're a local nowadays in Leipzig, you've got a team, that is, you've got a world class stadium. You've got a team that, yes, it may be new, but they're always constantly writing their own history, and you've got a apparent ownership that at the moment, and I'm hoping it stays this way, is we are the pinnacle of the Red Bull franchisee teams, I guess you could say, because you've got Salzburg, you've got Bragantino, I think, over in Brazil. Obviously, the New York Red Bulls as well, and you've got a few other clubs floating around as well in other parts of the world. So as long as we are still that pinnacle team, and Red Bull do right by all the fans over there and all international fans as well. Don't forget that. Then yeah, I don't see that as being too much of an issue going forward. It's just everyone's just going to keep on raving on about the 50-1 and how we're basically a plastic club, apparently just to sell energy drinks. But for me, it's more than that. It's more so what they can do over in East Germany and for the community as a whole.
Yeah, well, I actually did a podcast a few weeks back during the international break talking about the multi club model because there's a lot of that going on. A few of the clubs in Scotland are being bought by, Hibs. The owner of that also owns Auckland FC over here now in the A League, and it's involved in Vegas, and he's involved with Bournemouth. And then you've got Tony Bloom from Brighton. He's like buying into Hearts and that sort of stuff. So starting to filter into Scottish football. So we did a thing on that, and Red Bull was one that we focused on and spoke about, and their setup and how it all works. And it's something that I'm big on succession planning as a club myself, where I always say I want to have our starter in, but then I want to have their replacement in as their backup. So then when you sell someone, the next guy steps up, and then you replace the replacement, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you keep the production line. Then your third option at every position is someone from your youth academy coming through, and that's something that I want to see Celtic do. And I know that's something that Red Bull does quite a lot of, whether that's through Salzburg. Like you get players who come down to Salzburg, get developed there. They also do it with their coaches, which we'll touch on a bit later on in the pod as well. But they go to Salzburg, they do well there, then they look to move to Leipzig. Then from there they get whatever moves they want from there, and then the next one along. Like you've got the production line across the group where I'm wanting that within our club. So I am a little envious of that sort of setup because that's something that I think is good, and that's something I wish Celtic was good at. And I always joke that we should look for a green and white group or something like that. And if you have someone rich enough to have like us, Groningen, Werder Bremen, I'd be happy with those three just partnering up, and Shamrock Rovers in Ireland just for the tie. And if you got those four clubs, that'd be something similar that we could look to be part of as well. But Greenton and Specs take them off and focus on what we're doing. But yeah, just I was having a look while you mentioned it about the teams that are in Leipzig. So I got them here for you. So you got Lokomotive Leipzig. You've got, and the other one it says he was KSC Leipzig. They're the other ones that Google's saying are soccer teams. So yeah, I hate the term soccer. There anyway.
Yeah, I still call it football. So
I'll look at it this way. You and me are in AFL states, right? I'm in Melbourne. You're in Adelaide. They call AFL, so Australian rules footy or football over here, and they call it soccer. Yet they use their hands for more of that than they use their feet. That says it all.
That's right. Yeah,
So for me, football is this. It's not soccer. But
yeah,
anyway,
that's right.
What role do you think Leipzig plays in German's football culture? I know it's pretty, German's got a very strange culture, but it's something that for the whole, in general, like it's a work hard, party hard sort of culture across the country. But at the same time, I love the atmosphere and the 20s plenty for like away game tickets and that sort of stuff. So how do you see Leipzig playing into the German football culture overall?
Yeah, so that's a tough question. Obviously, from the outside looking in, I know a bit about German, football culture, of course, and over there, they sort of push the boundaries a little bit. Like they still have, you go to a Leipzig game, and if you just forget the ownership and things like that, you get the exact same thing over there. You've got your, I wouldn't necessarily call them ultras, but you've got your official fan groups over there. They could possibly call themselves ultras if they want. I don't want to label them as that, but that's normally what you have with all the other official fan groups that they call themselves ultras that have been around for many years, so to speak. And then you go over there and you can go get on the piss and all that and end up enjoying a game of football. No different to if you go to somewhere like Bremen or something, or down to Dortmund and do the same thing at Signal Iduna Park. And I've forgotten where to Bremen Stadium, so the lads over the English podcast over there can give me a bit of stick for that later if they notice this, but I'll let them know anyway when I have a chat with them. So, yeah, like it's one of those things where they say we have no culture because of being founded and how we are, but all the German people there themselves, it's so rooted heavily into their culture and into their politics and things like that. For me, I've always liked my football away from politics and things like that. But over there in Germany, like that's how they live. So sort of like how with us with the Aussie rules, it gets a little bit political and stuff like that sometimes, and it's the reason why I don't really follow it myself personally. So, but it's always evolving over there in Germany, in Leipzig, for their culture over there, and they're slowly finding their place, so to speak. But it's just more about acceptance, which it will probably never happen unless it even goes back to membership ownership, and I don't think it probably would. Then they'd probably still give us stick about it. I think another club over there, TSG Hoffenheim, has been talks that they're going to go back. I think it's Hoffenheim going back to member run ownership. They're currently also owned by a person like a billionaire of sort, I think, as well. So, but I think they're a bit different because they were originally member run, then then someone brought them out, and then if they go back, I don't think they'd get too much stick. Where us, on the other hand, we were created, as most of Germans would see, as a marketing tool to sell energy drinks.
But do you have wings? That's the real question.
Me, no. If I could fly, I'd probably be one of the first human people to fly, and I'd probably be very rich.
I had to say it.
You're right,
So,
mate.
no, we're talking about before about like, I was talking about Salzburg and the managers and players coming through that pathway, and we'll get into the team and the current squad overall. So just for those tuning in, Celtic fans who haven't really done much of a deep dive into it. So your current manager is Marco Rose, who we have history with from his time when he was managing at Red Bull Salzburg back in the Europa League in 2018. So beat us both times, 2-1 in one game. I think it was 2-1 in the other, or 3-2. Wasn't much in it. When he went to Borussia Mönchengladbach, we were also linked with him and in the papers and everything to try and come in to Celtic and become our manager. So I think that was after Brendan left the first time. So in my opinion, I rate your manager. I think he's great, but but not seeing him day in, day out the way you guys do, I want to get a feel from you, and as a Leipzig fan, how you personally would rate Marco Rose's work at the club now and over his whole tenure.
Yeah, so Marco Rosa is probably by far the best manager that we've had. I mean, statistically speaking, he is the highest points per game manager, and I believe the first as well manager to get to 100 games. I could be wrong on that one. For RB Leipzig as well. He's also a Leipzig native as well, Leipzig local. He's very well liked and very well loved over there. I've been a little bit critical of some of his tactics throughout the season and a little bit last year as well. It sometimes seems that we don't have a plan B. He's expanded a little bit this season with slightly different formations, which we can touch on when we get into the lineups and things like that when we talk about the game itself. But it's more so that he doesn't really bring on like players early enough to impact games. He doesn't really rotate the squads as much. He's slowly started doing that this season. As looking at the the fixtures, they're coming back back at us thick and fast, so to speak. So he's really got no choice about that. And I think that some of our injuries possibly could have been prevented maybe by better player management. But there's really no knock besides those couple of things there. And I've always said that he's going to be at the moment, he's still the right man for the job to take us forward, to take us that next step. And that next step would be getting to win the Bundesliga trophy, whether, somehow we could do it this season or relatively soon. I just don't want him to be a marketing ploy, so to speak, from, this is going to be ironic, from Red Bull's perspective, to, have the team very well liked or, things like that, because he's local. So like the face of a local, leading the local clubs, so to speak. And sometimes it feels like from the locals that he can sometimes do no wrong. But when I'm critical, I try to be as critical as possible, but without just completely just bashing, so to speak, because he's a great manager. He's the best we've had so far, and I still think that he's going to be taking us to newer heights, hopefully sooner rather than later.
It's kind of, I get what you're saying about it, because you're outside of that Leipzig bubble, not living over there. It's the same for us, like being outside of the Glasgow bubble. So I've been critical of Brendan Rodgers when he left last time. It's on the podcast where I called him a rat. I'll openly admit it, but he's won me over again. He's come back. He's done the right thing. He's set everything up, and everything's going well. So, like, that's in the past as far as I'm concerned. I'm focusing on the here and now. So, basically, I get it, like what you're saying, sort of thing. Like, you can look at it a bit more objectively when you're not living in the town and you're there every day. And yeah, but if he's the local boy done well, it's kind of, it's always a good story too. You said there's the formations and stuff like that. We'll talk about that a little later on, about the actual game, what you think will happen and that sort of stuff. But I've noticed, looking at your lineups, you tend to be bouncing between a few formations this season. So when you were playing St. Pauli, it was like a 3-4-3 by the looks of it. And then other mid to lower tier Bundesliga games you've played that way. But when you played against Dortmund, it looked like it was a 4-4-2, I think it was. Good old-fashioned 4-4-2. What's going on here?
Yeah, so I did think they were a little bit wide in the 4-4-2, but normally the like the RB Leipzig model, or the Red Bull team model, so to speak, is like a traditional 4-2-2. For people who love the football club managers and stuff like that, it's like a 4-2-2 narrow. So instead of having your normal wide midfielders in your for midfield, you have the two central attacking midfielders, normally playing on the outside shoulder of both two strikers up front. But we have been playing as like a 3-4-3, like you said, at some points as well. We started the Dortmund game by the looks of it as a 3-4-3, which I thought was a bit different, then transitioning to a 5-3-2 in defence. We're having the two midfielders sorry, I think it's a 5-3-2, going from the outside coming back to make a five-man defence. So we had Hendricks and Gertruda, who were on the outside of that formation, that would track back and then make a five-man defence. But they were pushing too forward and they weren't really being able to track back and get their back well enough. So I think Marco Rosa pulled the plug on that pretty quickly, and we went back to the traditional 4-2-2. So then that way, if they do go too far up the pitch, they're still structurally sound with four players at the back, and then slowly going forward and maybe overlapping if needed to get a bit of extra width when necessary, instead of just automatically being too advanced up the pitch.
So the midfield setup, if it's a 4-2-2-2, basically you've got 2 6s and 2 10s but no 8s. Is that pretty much right?
Yeah,
That'd be
pretty
something.
much. Although one of them will probably play as like a traditional eight, like a box to box midfielder, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then you'll instead of having two deep lying, midfielders, so to speak, and one they normally try to have one that is slightly different to the other. So one is like a more of a natural ball winner, and the other one's more of a workhorse who's able to distribute the ball well. But props off to both of the normal two central defensive midfielders, Xavier Schlager, who won't be playing, and Amadou Haidara. They basically are all their strengths are in all of those, so they can both play box to box. They can both play deep lying. They're both very good in all the roles that you need to have as a central defensive midfielder, and they work both hard. So that's normally how it is. And then the same thing with like your two number 10s, I guess you could say as well. With your two attacking midfielders, they normally try to track back and help with the defense as well. And then they also shift wide as well to give us a little bit of width, because the fullbacks normally play very, very wide, almost closer to the goal line.
Yeah, I actually noticed that, like your two tens, where you're talking about that. What I noticed was one was near a striker, but the one on, say, if the ball was on the right wing, the ten would push out towards the right into that channel, and then the other one from the other side would pop into the middle into the traditional 10 role at the top. So it's an interesting system that you guys play there and how it all works. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the battle when we get into the game a little bit more from the way we line up compared to that, because I think it could be a very interesting, you know, different battle of systems here. So I want to know, who are the key players for RB Leipzig this season and what role do they play?
Yeah, so some key players. I'm going to probably say a couple of players that most people wouldn't really think of, but I'll start with the most common ones. So Xavi Simons is going to be out. He's got a ligament damage to his ankle, so you won't have to worry about him. The same as Xavier Schlager. They're two top quality players who both do different roles. Xavi Simons is basically the creative spark at the moment. It was shown against Dortmund that we really lacked his creative ability and his actual technical dribbling ability to be able to beat a man. Antonio Nusa coming up, a young 18, I believe, year old Norwegian. He can also play like Xavi Simons, obviously, but he doesn't have the much quality as Xavi does possess. And then you've also got a couple of other players as well. So Christoph Baumgartner does get a little bit of under the radar, so to speak. He can also play as a striker and also play as that central attacking midfielder role. You've got, Yusuf Poulsen. He's been at the club for what seems like forever. He's the record appearance holder for us, and he probably won't start. He's normally been replaced by Benjamin Sesko, which is what most people know of. A little fun fact is that he's actually scored all three Champions League goals as well this season for RB Leipzig. No other player has scored just yet. Hopefully that does change as the season does progress in the Champions League. And then you've got Lewis Openda, who's the top goal scorer last season. That strike duo I'd love to keep on for 5 years, because that could be a formidable strike duo going forward. They really haven't achieved their goals so far this season. And then you've got players that just really don't really get as much attention, like Willie Orban down at centre back and central defence, who really keeps the shape and how everything's going. He's been leading the club for a little while. Peter Galacci needs to be mentioned as well, current number one goalkeeper. He's kept us in a couple of our games that we should have either lost or we've gotten draws from as well. So he's been really good for saving. I'm hoping that he's going to be fit and fired, ready to go. He does have a little bit of a niggling ankle injury that he's been given the special spray during matches. But if all goes well, he'll be starting in goal. But that's
Peter,
pretty much your main threat, so to speak. There are a lot of good individual players who are slowly trying to play as a team.
Peter Galacci is a funny one for me, because he's one that I've always, in my football manager, always try to sign him. So I know what he's about. And you said no one really talks about Bumgardner, and he was the only one that I really spoke about last night on our podcast. So yeah, I know there's talent there. It's going to be a interesting one. So who would be your current favourite player, current or former RB Leipzig player?
Willie Orban. Without a question, he's been my favourite player for some time. Just the type of person that he is. I remember he gave, I think just last season, he gave like blood plasma and bone marrow or something, and then like still like 4 days later, he still played a football game as well. So it's not just things like that. He's a great leader on the pitch, leads by example. He's always the first person to own up to mistakes that have happened for the team and things like that without putting the blame on just himself and things like that. And there's a couple of good players as well that come through. I've liked the real look of Castello Lakeba, who's going to be out injured as well. He seems to be like a replacement almost for Willie Orban going forward, if we can keep him for that long, as he normally plays centre back with him. But there's a couple of players I like as well throughout the whole game. But yeah, I try not to get too attached to players because sometimes players come and go, especially with the RB Leipzig model. So yeah, Willie Orban's been there for a very long time, and yeah, he's been a player since I've liked pretty much since he walked into the club.
I feel your pain with that whole player trading model thing. It's like I try not to buy tops with players' names and numbers on the back because then once they leave, what happens? Yeah. So it's one of those where I get you. Now, we're going to talk about the current situation with where Leipzig's sitting in terms of the Bundesliga. So we've touched on it. They're currently sitting second in the Bundesliga. Bayern Munich's on top. But then in the Champions League, you're yet to pick up any points. But then if you're going to talk about, like, if it was the old group of death sort of situation on the old system, it'd be a nightmare. But you guys have started off with games and defeats to Atletico Madrid, Juventus, and Liverpool. Doesn't get any tougher for you, does it? Like, that's not fun. So,
Yeah.
how do you rate the team's performance so far this season, both in the league and then in the Champions League?
Well, you're right. It doesn't get. You said it doesn't get much tougher. Although we also have Inter Milan and Aston Villa coming up as well as the next two games. So it doesn't get any easier. Period. Obviously, besides when we play you guys tomorrow night for us, or
Are we the
tonight
easy game?
Tuesday. Sorry.
Are we the easy game?
Well, I wouldn't say you guys are the easy game because that would be discrediting, Celtic, especially over in Glasgow at Celtic Park. But this would be the game that we would be looking at to try to take 3 points. I don't think it's going to
No.
happen. We'll get into that later. But I'm not just saying that because I'm also on a Celtic podcast. I'll talk about our chances a bit later when I'm asked. But yeah, the Champions League, considering we're talking about that at the moment, yeah, look, we've been in games. We were unlucky to lose the Atletico Madrid game. I thought we were probably the better team for a vast majority of it until the crowd pretty much got them over the line, and a couple of little defensive errors and things like that, just switching off at the wrong times. You switch off against top teams in world football, you're going to know about it. Simple as that. And then to come back home and then play Juve, the old lady who we never played before in the history of our short 15-year lifespan of the club. We should have won that game. They were down to 10 men, had a player sent off. We were also up. I believe it was 2-1 or something like that at the time, and then they end up running over the top of us and just wanting it more and winning it, and that's just something shouldn't happen in world football, especially at home in front of all your fans and on a Champions League night as well. But I put that down to not poor management or anything like that. It's just more so the young squad and something like that they'll learn from that going forward. It's more of a mental thing like that. And then Liverpool, we were in it for a little bit, probably first 20 minutes or so, and then Liverpool just ran over the top of us, and after that we pretty much weren't in it at all. So it's been a real mixed bag come to Champions League, although we've shown up more so, funny enough, in the Champions League than we have domestically in the Bundesliga, and that's actually where we've excelled this season. As you said, we're sitting second just behind the Rekordmeister in Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga. Unfortunately suffered our first defeat against Borussia Dortmund at Signal Iduna Park on the top spiel on Saturday night. For us, 4 a.m. or for me, 4 a.m. in the morning. I did a live stream of that, and I was not impressed from what I saw. It was a complete 180-degree shift from what we saw the game before against St. Pauli in the DFB Pokal when we beat them quite comprehensively 4-2. So I've said already that we need to do another 180-degree shift tomorrow night or tonight, depending on where this airs and who's viewing this podcast in Glasgow, as otherwise, if we don't do that, we're not going to be winning at all. We were second rate to the ball, 7 shots to 20 alone, no corners. We were woeful at defence as well. We've been pretty poor at our set pieces all year, which is very funny because we are the best defensive team in the league, which sort of probably gives a bit more credit to Peter Galacci in goal as well for just the amount of times he's given us the ability to stay in games. We've dropped points against like Union Berlin and St. Pauli in the Bundesliga, rightfully so. We should be top, in my opinion, if we didn't lose those winnable games, although they were draws at the time. So you'd rather take a point than not. But it just goes to show that we're dropping points where we shouldn't, and if you're going to take that next step as a football club and start challenging for the title, even if you're not playing well, you still got to get the job done, so to speak. So the standout for the season has been our defence. From last season, we've let in a lot less goals than we normally do, and surprisingly enough, our attack is actually not as good this season as it has been last season. Lewis Openda and Benjamin Sesko haven't really given the numbers that you'd sort of come to expect. I know it's still early on in the Bundesliga, just 9 games in. But yeah, the attack hasn't fired, so I'm just hoping they're getting a slow warm-up and they start firing any minute.
Fair enough. I hope they do as well in the league, but not in their game. No, it's good to get that bit of background on it, because it's one for me where I've been looking at your scores and there's like the 3 Champions League games, they were all a 1-goal loss. So, and you're playing against 3 teams that'll probably be in the last 8. Let's be honest. So when it gets to that stage of the competition, these guys will still be there or thereabouts. So it's a tough ask for you. Bundesliga, yeah, you're sitting in second, as you said, but I understand exactly what you mean. Like, if you slip or you switch off or whatever in the Champions League, you get punished. You do it in the league, it's not as bad. We have that problem ourselves. So, yeah, like our game against Dortmund where we got done 7-0, it was like 4 goals were basically, we've cleared it defensively, but it got to our midfield, and the secondary clearance where we should have, in Scotland, we'd get to the ball and we'd clear it, bang, someone was through, taking it off our toes and scoring. And then there was a couple where we gave the ball away and they scored. So you get punished against teams like that. That's the difference we're finding is a jump for us from Scottish football to the Champions League, and we're learning and getting street smart. But yeah, it's I can understand what you mean about that, and playing Atletico, Juventus and Liverpool, tough ask. So yeah.
I know, even though that you guys got hammered 7-1 against Borussia Dortmund, but they have been undefeated so far this season at Signal Iduna Park. But I don't actually take that as Dortmund were just that miles ahead of Celtic. I actually, by looking at that game as well for myself, because I was like, oh, okay, so both teams have actually lost against Dortmund. So where do we level up, so to speak? Coming up into this fixture, I just think that you guys were really off that day, to be honest, and some of those goals were a bit lucky for Dortmund to get. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on a Celtic podcast. That's actually my honest opinion, because we just didn't even bother showing up the other day and we got beaten 2-1. So if we actually showed up, I would have seen us won quite comfortably, about 3-1 or something like that. And I think you guys would have had a really big chance in being able to beat them first at Signal Iduna Park this season if you guys, for no disrespect, didn't really show up on the day, so to speak. So you guys were completely off.
The funny thing is, I'm not big on stats, right, when it comes to football, but we've got a guy, Mahesh, who comments on our channel all the time, and he's big on it. And he looked into it, and he said, you guys against Dortmund, the XG for Dortmund, so expected goals for them, was 2.53 or something like that. And they scored 2. For us against them, it was a similar amount of shot attempts they had in both games as well. Possession was similar, all this sort of stuff, right? Against us, the XG was 2.63. So it was like 0.1 of a goal different, and they put 7 past us and they put 2 past you guys or whatever it was, or how many? Yeah, it was 2-1.
Yeah, 2-1, yeah.
So that pretty much backs up what you just said as well. Even though I'm not big on stats, I'm like, okay, Mahesh was right. There you go. Gonna have to give him credit now.
I don't mind my stats. I'm a little bit of a stats man, a little bit, not as heavily or anything like that. I look at things more from an analytical, tactical perspective, and XG is one of those things where it's like it's expected goals or something like that. It's not really something that's going to happen. It's pretty much weighs up the total chance, and I don't know how they actually work it out, but just for say layman's quick terms, that is probably wrong. It would be like total shots to how many big chances that you had, and the players that probably took them to see if they would actually get them. So for me, XG is just like, you probably should have had that many goals, but it doesn't necessarily mean you will have those goals.
Exactly, 100%. So let's roll on to the final part of the podcast, and the part most people will be tuning in for, which is talking about our actual game in the Champions League tonight. It's Tuesday for us, so I'll say tonight for those watching over in Scotland. So how are you feeling heading into the game, and what are your general thoughts about just the game in general? We'll get into the tactics and all that a little later on, but just general thoughts right now. How are you feeling on it?
50-50. I know some, supporters are very cautious and, not giving us too much of a chance, so to speak, of the horrid performance that we, showed up with against Borussia Dortmund. What some people also don't realise is that we've been, like up and down. Like it really depends on what team shows up. And I think that Marco Rose is going to drill it into the lads that going over there, some will probably be expecting like a hostile crowd and things like that, which is it's going to play a part at least in the first 15, 20 minutes or so. It's yes, we're used to being booed or anything like that, and big stadiums in Germany on a weekly basis, but it's a European Championship night. I don't really like Dortmund, obviously, and then I'm not saying that because we got lost as Dortmund and Bayern Munich are two teams I don't like. So, and for me, Dortmund have a better atmosphere than Bayern Munich do, but that's nothing compared to Celtic Park, especially on a Champions League night. Champions League night is just one of those extra spectacles that you just got to be there basically, or as much as possible to feel it. And every single time I've watched a Celtic game, especially against RB Leipzig, it's always the atmosphere's bled into the TV. You feel as close as you can get, and it's like deafening and things like that. And I think if I back the lads to get the job done, but it really depends on their mindset and how they're actually going to do it. That's not actually what I predicted. It really depends on what team shows up. So that first 20 minutes is going to be absolutely pivotal on really basically if you guys are going to be able to get a comfortable win, or if we're going to give it a game at least and either take a point or get a win for ourselves. So yeah, it's basically I made a call during my live stream watch along against Borussia Dortmund, and I think it was at the 60th minute mark. I said if we don't score in the next 10 minutes, we'd lose the game, and yeah, that's exactly what happened.
So basically, what your team's walking into is Celtic Park on a Champions League night, and there's articles everywhere, people like Messi and Iniesta and so many people commenting on what that's like. And when those disco lights that we've got go on, and we do the huddle and the green lights on and the crowd is just roaring, when you're sitting there just watching it, watch the camera shaking. The stadium is moving. It's an absolute special beast, Celtic Park on a Champions League night. And as you're saying, and the reason I bring that up is you're saying that first 20 minutes is going to be critical. And yeah, our fans will be singing themselves hoarse. They're not going to be able to talk much afterwards. We get the first goal, the place is going to be going absolutely off. Like, it's not going to be a fun place to be if you're not wearing green and white. So it's one of them where I'm 50-50 on how I think the game's going to go too. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. That first 20 minutes is going to say a lot about the game, especially with the form both of our teams are in lately and all this stuff as well. So what do you think the game plan will be for Leipzig in this match?
What I think it's going to be is what I hope it's going to be, and that is essentially just go straight out on attack from the get-go. I want to see the lads, like I said, do a 180-degree shift. Basically, just go out and throw caution to the wind and, give ourselves the best chance of first getting a goal early on to try to silence that crowd, or which could, turn it into even more loudness and hostility. You never know. But if we don't take the game straight away, then, yeah, it's not going to... it's not going to end well for us, so to speak. Like we've got to go in the mindset that this is an only winnable game. Like there's no substitute. It's a win or nothing. There's no really better time, so to speak, and that's not discrediting Celtic in any way, to try to actually get some points in the Champions League. Otherwise, until maybe the last two games against Sporting and Strumgras, and even Sporting themselves are no slouches at the moment either. So I'm hoping that we do not mess around with too many tactic wise. I don't mind if we do start with a 3-4-3. Most likely we will be reverting at some stage to the 4-2-2. I don't know exactly what players are going to be going there, as Marco Rosa will probably just take everyone that's fit possible. I'm expecting Nicholas Seiwald, who normally plays in central defensive midfield position near Amadou Haidara, will probably get some minutes, although he's just coming back from an injury, so I don't think he'll start the game. I'll be quite surprised if he does. For me, Marco Rosa probably needs to start the most experienced players as possible, just to sort of, I guess, not try to limit the young guys or anything like that from experiencing the atmosphere, because I think they're going to experience it through the whole 90 minutes plus extra time. But I think that if you need to start with your senior squad, so to speak, so Haidara and Campbell in the middle, strike your two lethal forwards up front in Openda and Sesko, probably I was going to say Openda again, Baumgartner in where Xavi's role is, and most likely young Antonio Nusa on the right there, and then a normal back four with Gertruda, Henriks, Willie Orban, and as he's been pretty poor so far this season, but Lucas Klosterman as well. He's been around for a while. I think he's played at least 300 games for us. He's 28 years old. He's been in plenty of Champions League nights. You just back the experience.
Makes sense. Yeah, I was just looking at our upcoming fixtures in the Champions League, and this is like, so we started off with Bratislava, and then it was Dortmund and Atalanta away, both of those two away. So we knew that'd be tough. We managed to wrangle a point over in Atalanta, away there in Italy. So you guys are probably our toughest game the rest of the Champions League until our last one, which will be Aston Villa, and if they keep the form they've got going on, they'll already be guaranteed a spot in the next round anyway. So we're thinking by then hopefully they'll rotate some players. So like we've got you guys, then we've got, I think it was Club Brugge was next. Yeah, we got Club Brugge in the Champions League, then Dinamo Zagreb away, and then we've got Young Boys, and then we go away to Aston Villa. So there's a lot of points there for us, but this is one that I'm looking at thinking if we can get at least 1 point, if not win the game, we're flying. So we're setting ourselves up well. So we want to try and turn Celtic Park back into that fortress it used to be back in the day, and it hasn't been in a long time. And yeah, I think you said having that veteran experience out there is actually going to be a good thing for you guys, especially in that first 20 minutes we keep talking about. So one of my later on questions that I'll jump up here is you said you want to go all out attack. So I was saying, are you expecting this to be a high scoring match?
Well, that really depends on, depending on the team that shows up for an RBL perspective. I mean, even if we don't show up, it could be a high-scoring match for you guys, really, because some of our set pieces and defending has been woeful at times as well. But I don't expect it to be too much of a high-scoring match. I mean, we've both got two quality, goalkeepers going to be between the sticks as well. So we've got Peter Galacci for myself, and for you guys, we've got Kasper Schmeichel, if I remember correctly, over there as well. And he's no slouch between the sticks. He's still a top quality goalkeeper. So, I mean, I can see this probably being roughly a 2-1 game, but it really depends on who's going to end up taking the points. But I think there's going to be a lot of shots on target, probably 15 at least a piece by the end of the game for both. Hopefully more. It'd be great to see some end-to-end stuff, but yeah, depends on players as well. You can't just have players going all out and leaving it all on the pitch for 20 minutes and then gassed for the next 90. So, or I should say 70. So. But no, I'm not expecting a massively high score. It wouldn't surprise me if it would be, but I think it's going to be a 2-1 either way. But I think both teams are going to really try to go for it and go from there, because if I'm looking from your perspective as well, like I can't see you guys not taking it to us, especially at home, and especially wanting to see just how well you guys can stack up to, like you said, one of your tougher opponents, so to speak, and we have basically got our Champions League on the line, so we've got no choice but to basically go out all attack. And if we're conceding already, like, within the first 20 minutes, or even just, by the halftime break, it's an uphill battle from there.
Yep, have to agree with you on exactly what you said about how we would be taking it as well, because I'm looking at it going, both teams have got enough talent there that this could easily be a 4-3 or a 5-4 sort of game. I think there's going to be a goal in it. That's it, right? I don't think it's going to be a massive one where a team's going to win like 4-1 or 5-2 or anything like that. But I'm thinking both teams have got a lot of strike force there. Both have experienced keepers. Both of us have quality defense that there. So it's gonna be a bit of a battle there. So what do you think will be the key areas of play that will have the biggest impact on deciding which team gets the points in this match?
Oh, that's a tough question. To be
I
blatantly
can throw
honest.
something there to give you some thinking time if you want.
No, it's fine, mate. It's fine. But then again, no one would know if you would cut this or anything like that, I suppose. Anyway, now, normally you'd say like your attack or anything like that, and for me, I'm probably going to say it's the defensive third. So I talk about, like, a lot of times on the podcast and during live streams. The pitch being up into three sets. The attacking third, the middle third, like the contested third, where the midfield is ball and one, and it's a lot of possession is in dispute, to probably use maybe an AFL term or something like that. And then you've got your defensive third, depending on which team is what, would be the opposition's attacking third. But for me, it's probably going to be that midfield area, and then seeing how much you can catch a team on the break. I'm not too sure on the Celtic style at the moment under Brendan Rodgers, under his second spell. But if I'm going by his last, like the last spell, that you guys were still pretty attacking, and the same thing under ex-Aussie, Ange Postecoglou. He's still an Aussie, but I should say ex-Celtic manager Ange Postecoglou as well. So, I expect you guys to really be taking it and on. You've got some good players as well who can distribute the ball as well. So, I think that midfield and, just that's between the core midfield and just starting up to that attacking third for both sides is going to be where the pivotal moments are going to be, with all the first and final passes coming into play of all the attacks.
Yeah, so for me, what I'm thinking is for us, and I said this last night, is it's going to be interesting to see what our game plan is, because when we played Dortmund, we just went balls to the wall sort of thing, and it was just shocking, right? And then the next game, we learned our lesson. We went away and we sat deep and we're a bit more pragmatic. So for us, it's going to be, what tactic are we going to implement here? Are we going to press high and bring our line up and try and pin you down, or are we going to sit back a bit and then try and hit on the counter? Because either option, we've got the speed, guys. We've got great wing play, and we've got the right work ethic as a team that we can play either way. So we've got a couple of options. I don't even know what we're going to do. So it's kind of hard when I say, what's your expected starting lineup? And I look at it and go, okay, so if we're going to play more pressing, then I'd probably have Bernardo on the bench and I'd start Rio Hurtado. But if we're going to go more the pragmatic sit back and counter, then I'd probably start Bernardo in the middle, give us more size, and then we could hit on the counter in that regard. So it's kind of interesting to see how it's going to play out. It depends what Brendan's going to do. But yeah, I just think it's one of those games where I normally say in the Champions League, it's the middle of the park. It's the most important thing, because if you don't get your midfield organised, particularly in the transition phases of the game, like if there's a throw in and everyone can get set up, or free kick and everyone can get set up, different story. But it's those defensive transitions when like we've just had a shot, haven't scored, it's out with your guys, you're coming at us, and keeping your shape, that's the key battle for me. Whoever can control the defensive transition and punish the team as soon as they win the ball and go back hard the other way and break them down, that's where I see a lot of Champions League games getting decided, basically. So it's going to be an interesting battle, especially with if you guys are playing a 4-2-2-2 and we're playing the 4-3-3 that we play. That should give us one extra in the middle in a certain area, but that'll give you guys two extra in the middle between the lines of our defensive midfield and our actual and where your strikers would be and our centre backs. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a clash of styles.
Yeah, absolutely. We're known for our counter-attacking football as well, so to speak. So, and we've got such great pace as well. In the squad, even with Xavi Simons out, we've still got some pacey customers up front. Benjamin Sesko is quite quick for someone. You look at his size and just how high he can jump. Like he's such a powerful and quick footballer. You got Pender up there. You have Noosa. Baumgartner isn't the quickest, but he's still not slow. That's for sure. And we've got injection off the bench as well. That is quite quick, and that's if Asano Drago doesn't start. He's just coming back from an injury, young 18-year-old as well. So he's quite talented as well. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of pace on for RBL. So basically, you're going to be very wary of any sort of counter-attacking football because we can exploit it if we can.
So that's where, if that's the case, our pressing game is, we could get caught out if we press too hard and you spring it that way. So then you probably have to play that a bit more pragmatic. So either or doesn't bother me. But what would constitute a good result for you in this match, Justin?
A draw, simple. So that's a good result. A great result is a win. But for me, at least taking a point, from what already was going to be a difficult match anyway. When I did the the preview of the whole Champions League fixture and the new lineup and the new look of it for this season, I looked at all the fixtures, and Celtic was one of those ones I said 50-50. The other two were going to be Sporting and also Aston Villa. The other ones were all going to be absolutely almost difficult to win, even though we were in a couple of our first early games as well. So that's not writing off Celtic by any means, but especially now, like a win is a great result. A good result is a draw. So looking at that whole entire list, it's now or never.
It's exactly how I feel as well. Like in Champions League in Europe in particular, you want to win your home games and try and draw your away games. That's in an ideal world, but there's levels to this, and I understand that you've got your top 5 leagues and you've got the next tier down, and we're ranked with coefficients and everything. If we can play against a team in the Bundesliga who's sitting second there and pick up a point, it's still going to set us up well, because what'll that put us on? 5 points so far with 4 games to go, and there's 3 of them there that are winnable. That could set us up really nicely to get in that 9th to 24th or whatever it is, or whatever it is, to get to that next stage in the Champions League. So, yeah, I think that'd be a good result would be a draw, and a great result would be a win. What's your...
Sorry, mate.
No, go on.
I was going to say it's 9 to 24 for the playoff round, so like the traditional round of 16, where I think the teams play one home game and one away game against the same team, and then it's the top 9 or top 8, I should say, I think is the automatic qualification for the also round of 16, Robin, which is after that. There's like a playoff round of 16, and then there's the normal round of 16, I guess you could say.
Yeah, 100%. That's how it is. So I'm not expecting us to finish top 8 like we can dream. But
well, there's no way we are. So
the old thing with us, like if you asked me at the start of the season, we were Fearless Predictions pod, and I think, I can't remember if it was this season or last season's one. One of my first predictions was we're going to play a knockout round in the Champions League or in Europe, even the Europa League, after Christmas. We never get to that point. Now they've changed the thing, so we're going to be playing leagues till after Christmas. But if we can get to the knockout stage off the back of that, even if it's like that old round of 16, so it's 9th through to 24th, and we're playing home and away, that is progress for us in Europe. We don't normally get to that stage, so... yeah, I'd be happy with that. I'd say, what's your predicted starting lineup? But I don't know if you because of the amount of injuries I've heard you've got throughout this pod, that I don't know if, and you said you don't know who they're going to take. So do you want to predict that?
Yeah, no, certainly can have a crack. We do have some injuries, coming into this game. It's a couple of players have come back. So the main ones that won't be going, I know Sela Lekeba didn't get up for the game. He doesn't have a massively long-term injury. He's a short-term injury. So he may play before the international break next week or so. So he might get up over the weekend for Borussia Mönchengladbach, but I don't think he's not going to be playing Tuesday night. So the only other ones that won't be going over there is, off the top of my head, it's Xavi Simons and David Raum. They're both out with, and Xavier Schlager, of course, who did an ACL last year. So, and the other two are probably coming back just before Schlager is. So I'll probably start from down the back. Peter Galacci with a niggling injury. I expect him to start in goal only because of the severity of the game, but I wouldn't be disappointed if Martin van der Voort does get the nod in there in between the sticks, because he's still a very top quality young goalkeeper. I expect a back four of the Gertruda starting from right to left, from Gertruda on the right and having Willie Orban, and normally Casado Lukeba will be next to him, but I'm going to tip experience over youth. So Lucas Klosterman will be playing next to Willie Orban instead of having young Chadel Bishebu, who will probably come on at some point, as he can also play a little bit of left back. And then Benny Henriks will probably play in the David Round position as left back. In midfield, starting with the two central defensive midfielder slots going into this 4-2-2 formation, I'm going to probably say Amadou Haidara and Kevin Campbell if we're going for experience. Otherwise, Arthur Vermeeren, who we just recently got, I think he's on loan this season from Atletico Madrid with a buy option, which I think it's pretty much already done that it's a buy option for next year. He might stay next to Kevin Campbell and resting Haidara. But it really depends, because both of those players played and started. I believe Haidara also started against Dortmund. Excuse me. So I predict both Haidara and Campbell most likely to be in there going for experience, although one of those will be swapped out, which would be Haidara probably for Vermeeren. Up front, I would probably say in the central attacking midfielder roles, Christoph Baumgartner, and going with Antonio Nusa on the right, Christoph Baumgartner on the left, where normally Xavi Simons will play. That's probably your most likelihood two that are going to play there. That's the best two that we could play. We do have some rotational players that could possibly play in those slots as well. Sano Drago is coming back from injury, so I don't think he will be starting in there, but I do expect him to come on at some point and with an injection of pace and the skill that he has. Then up front, I'm going to go straight away with Openda and Sesko. You have to start those two. That's the most formidable strike partnership that we have, and the best chance of us scoring our goals up front. We do have Yusuf Poulsen and Andre Silva as replacements who can go up there. UC is probably your best of the options for maybe experience. If you're going to take one off and put one on as a substitute, like you could put Sesko on as a substitute, which in its own right is just ridiculous. You don't have the option, and a lot of teams in world football to bring on a caliber of that. So that could also be an option. And maybe if we weren't going to start with the two central attacking midfielders of Baumgartner and Antonio Nusa, Elif Elmas could also get a start as well. But he doesn't really seem to be in much favour with Marco Rosa, which is I've been pretty critical of, as he's actually a decent footballer. He just hasn't been able to show his form from Napoli.
That's nice to hear. My starting lineup, I'll just go through it as well. It'll be Kasper Schmeichel in goals, Alistair Johnson at right back. We're going to have Team America and our centre-backs in Cameron Carter-Vickers and Austin Trusty. And then on the left, we'll have Alex Valle. Middle of the park, because it's 4-3-3, so we'll have, sitting in the 6 will be Callum McGregor. Playing in the 8 role will be Arne Engels. And playing alongside him, because we'll probably have it a bit more proactive there, will be Paolo Bernardo. Up front at striker will be Kyogo, starting through the middle. On the right, we'll have Nicholas Kuhn. On the left will be Daisen Maeda. And, yeah, we're laughing. So a lot of speed, a lot of tactical ability, and we'll go from there. But as a option for Kyogo, if we want to go bigger and get someone to hold it up, you've always got Adam Eder there to come on who can play that role as well. So overall, I think we've had our score predictions. I said it's going to be 1 goal in it. I'm going to say 2-1 for Celtic. You'll probably say, you said 2-1 before, so to Leipzig. There you go. And
yeah, depending on the show, who shows up. So
fair enough. And what I want to do is just thank you again for coming on the podcast, Justin. Really appreciate it. Do you want to just give your podcast, RBL Talks, a plug? Tell people where they can find it again. Give your social media, plug all that stuff, and then we'll just wrap up the podcast.
Yeah, so RBL Talk, you can search for that all on any podcast network. We're on all the major podcast networks. Just search RBL and space talk. You can also go to the homepage, rbltalk.com. I also post where the latest news of RB Leipzig and things like that are. Also have the supporter feed and stuff like that. Get episodes early, a few things as well. Something that I haven't released yet, which is coming out next week, so I can't technically plug that just yet, but that will be coming in a week or so as well. Obviously, I don't think many Celtic fans are going to go over there and contribute to the show, but you can always hope that something happens like that. But yeah, and there's the YouTube channel. If you want to come over and go for a live stream watch along, join in. I encourage everyone to get involved. Doesn't matter, even just a general chat. Just go, how's Leipzig's performing? If you want to ask a question, if I'm doing a live, go for it. You don't have to specifically be watching the games if you don't follow RB Leipzig as a football club. And we're on all major social networks. I'm going to call it Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere, you name it.
Perfect. Happy days. Everyone check that out if you got a chance. But yeah, thanks for your time here, Justin. Appreciate it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And come on, Celtic.